No phones, no books, no lights once the sun went down. Now imagine that isn't one bad afternoon, it's every single day for 300,000 years. So what did ancient humans actually do with all that empty time? For most of human history, the day didn't end when the sun went down. It just changed shape. Hunting was over. Gathering was over, and there was nothing left to do except sit there in the dark with your own brain. This wasn't a rare event. This was most evenings for most of human existence. You might assume boredom is a modern problem, something invented by long commutes and slow Wi-Fi. It isn't. Boredom is ancient. What's modern is having 100 instant ways to make it disappear. So picture it. The hunting's done, the fire's lit, and there are still hours left before sleep. What did people actually do? The first answer is simpler than you'd think. They made marks. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists found pieces of ochre deliberately engraved with cross-hatched patterns dated to around 100 years ago. These aren't hunting tools, they're not calendars. As far as anyone can tell, someone just sat there scratching lines into a rock for no practical reason at all, which sounds a lot like doodling. That same restless mark-making shows up again and again across the archaeological record. Deep inside Chauvet Cave in France, ancient humans painted horses, lions, and rhinos on cave walls so far underground that daylight never reached them. Whoever made those paintings wasn't doing it to survive. They were doing it because sitting in a cave with nothing to look at eventually makes you want to make something to look at. Boredom didn't just produce art, it produced games. Long before video games, before playing cards, before dice as we know them, people were rolling knucklebone. Literally, the small ankle bones of sheep and goats, called Astragali, have been found worn, smooth, and modified across sites spanning thousands of years and multiple continents. They were used for games of chance, for gambling, for passing time in exactly the way people now scroll through their phones. By the time you get to ancient Egypt, boredom had evolved into something with actual rules. Senet, considered the oldest known board game in the world, shows up in pre-dynastic Egyptian burial sites dating back over 5,000 years. 2 players, 30 squares, and a whole lot of downtime to fill. It was popular enough that pharaohs were buried with their Senet boards, presumably so they wouldn't be bored in the afterlife either. But here's the part that's easy to miss. None of this was frivolous. Every one of these boredom-driven habits, doodling, storytelling, games, did something for the group that raw survival skills never could. Take firelight. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner studied the Juhonzi Bushmen of the Kalahari and found something striking. Daytime conversation was almost entirely practical. Who found what? Who saw what? But at night, around the fire, that practical talk almost disappeared. Instead, people told stories. Old stories, embellished stories, stories about ancestors and animals and each other. Firelight, it turns out, was humanity's original storytelling stage, and boredom was the reason the show existed in the first place. This matters more than it sounds like it should. Storytelling around a fire wasn't just entertainment. It passed down survival knowledge, reinforced social bonds, and taught children how their world worked, all wrapped inside something that felt like play instead of a lesson. Boredom didn't stop at pictures and games. It invented sound too. At Hohle Fels cave in Germany, archaeologists found a flute carved from a vulture's wing bone, dated to roughly 40,000 ago, one of the oldest musical instruments ever discovered. Someone sat down with nothing but time and a bone and decided the silence needed fixing. Once there was music, there was almost certainly dancing. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies find rhythmic movement showing up constantly around fires and gatherings, not for any practical reason, but because bodies that have nothing else to do start moving to a beat. It costs no resources, requires no tools, and it's still exactly what a bored teenager does with headphones in today. Boredom even shaped how ancient humans decorated themselves. In Morocco, researchers uncovered shell beads deliberately pierced and shaped for stringing, dating back roughly 82,000 years. These beads didn't help anyone hunt or find shelter or stay warm. They existed purely because someone had free hands and free time and decided plain skin needed color. Even children got in on it. Small carved figurines, human shapes, animal shapes, start showing up across the archaeological record long before anyone needed them to survive. The most famous is the so-called Venus of Willendorf, a small carved figure over 25,000 years old. Nobody's entirely sure what it meant, but somebody spent real time and real effort shaping it, with nothing forcing them to. Some of the oldest continuous storytelling traditions on Earth come from Aboriginal Australian communities, whose oral histories have been shown to preserve real geographic and environmental details, like coastlines that disappeared underwater over 7,000 years ago, passed down purely through spoken story. That's not just entertainment. That's an entire information system, built and maintained by people with long, empty stretches of time and a habit of filling them with words. And that connects to something modern psychology is only now catching up to. A well-known study found that boredom actually increases creative output. People given a boring task right before a creative one consistently generated more original ideas than people who weren't bored first, which suggests something wild. Those long, empty, understimulated hours our ancestors were stuck with may not have just been survivable. They may have been necessary. Here's where it gets a little uncomfortable. In one well-known study, researchers left people alone in a room with literally nothing to do except think, and gave them the option to give themselves a mild electric shock if they got bored enough. A significant number of people chose the shock. Being alone with an unoccupied mind was apparently worse than mild physical pain. Compare that to someone sitting by a fire 100,000 years ago, scratching lines into a rock. They didn't have that option. They just had to sit with it, and out of sitting with it came almost everything we now call culture. There's also a much older reason boredom exists at all, one that goes back further than humans themselves. Researchers studying play behavior in great apes have found that idle time, especially in young animals, consistently produces exploratory, low-stakes play. It's how young minds test their environment safely. Boredom, in other words, might be evolution's way of nudging a brain that isn't currently endangered to go find something useful to figure out. So every time an ancient human sat by a dying fire with nothing to do and started scratching a pattern into a rock, or making up a story about the hunt that definitely got a little more dramatic each time it was told, or carving a small figure with no practical use at all, or piercing a shell just to string it around their neck, none of that was a waste of time. It was, in a very real sense, the beginning of art, music, games, and shared culture, and the entire human habit of making meaning out of empty hours. Which brings us back to right now. The instinct hasn't gone anywhere. Every time you doodle in the margin of a notebook, invent a game to pass a long car ride, hum a tune with no reason to, or tell an exaggerated version of your day to a friend, you're doing exactly what a bored human did around a fire 100,000 years ago. The tools changed. The urge didn't. So the next time you're stuck somewhere with absolutely nothing to do, remember, you're not wasting time. You're running one of the oldest programs the human brain has, and it's the same one that eventually gave us cave paintings, music, board games, jewelry, stories that survived 7,000 years, and every story anyone has ever told around a fire. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like and subscribe for more videos exploring the weirder, more human side of ancient history. And let me know in the comments, what's the most creative thing boredom has ever made you do?